Lisa Borsch. In October 2014, authorities in Kvissel, Denmark, responded to a residence where a woman had been found with severe injuries. When emergency responders arrived, they discovered Tina Romer Holtegard with multiple wounds to her body. Despite immediate medical intervention, she did not survive the injuries. The investigation that followed would reveal a disturbing connection between the incident and online extremist content. Lisa Borsch, who lived at the residence, was present when authorities arrived. During initial questioning, investigators discovered she had been accessing extremist material online, particularly content related to radical organizations. Her internet browsing history showed extensive viewing of propaganda videos and materials promoting violence. This digital evidence would become crucial to understanding what had motivated the attack on her mother. Forensic examination revealed Tina had sustained approximately 20 wounds. The pattern and location of injuries indicated a sustained attack rather than a brief confrontation. Medical examiners determined the injuries were inflicted with considerable force, suggesting intense aggression during the incident. The scene showed signs of struggle, with evidence that Tina had attempted to defend herself. The investigation revealed Lisa had not acted alone. An accomplice had been present during the attack, and forensic evidence placed both individuals at the scene when the injuries were inflicted. Investigators recovered digital communications between Lisa and her accomplice, discussing their interest in extremist ideology, including messages that suggested they had been consuming violent propaganda together. The communications indicated they had developed shared beliefs, influenced by the online content they accessed. Examination of Lisa's background revealed a teenager who had become increasingly isolated and withdrawn in the months before the incident. Friends and family members reported noticing changes in her behavior and interests, though few had understood the extent of her involvement with extremist material. Her internet activity showed she had been spending extensive time viewing disturbing content and engaging with online communities that promoted radical ideologies. The legal proceedings focused heavily on the role that online radicalization had played in leading to the attack. Prosecutors presented evidence of Lisa's digital footprint, demonstrating how she had progressively consumed more extreme content over time. Mental health experts testified about the potential effects of such material on adolescent thinking and decision-making, though they noted that exposure to disturbing content alone does not typically result in violent behavior. Defense attorneys argued that Lisa's age and the influence of the online material should be considered as mitigating factors. They presented evidence about her psychological state and the ways in which extremist propaganda is designed to manipulate vulnerable individuals. However, prosecutors emphasized that regardless of external influences, Lisa had made deliberate choices that led to her mother's passing. The trial in early 2016 resulted in conviction on charges related to the attack. Lisa Borsch received a sentence of 9 years imprisonment, reflecting both the seriousness of the offense and considerations related to her age at the time of the incident. Her accomplice received a separate sentence for their role in what occurred. While Lisa's case involved ideological influence, the next tragedy would demonstrate how severe mental health conditions could lead to an outcome that shocked investigators with its intensity. Jessica Camilleri. On July 20th, 2019, emergency services in Sydney, Australia received a call from a woman reporting she had harmed her mother at their residence in St. Clair. When officers arrived at the scene, they discovered evidence of extreme violence. The victim, Rita Camilleri, had sustained injuries so severe that investigators initially struggled to process what they were seeing. This case would become one of the most disturbing in recent Australian legal history. Jessica Camilleri was found at the scene and immediately taken into custody. During questioning, she acknowledged her involvement in what had occurred to her mother. The extent of the injuries inflicted shocked even experienced homicide investigators. Forensic examination revealed Rita had been subjected to an extended and brutal attack that went far beyond what would have been necessary to cause her passing. The forensic evidence painted a disturbing picture of what had transpired in the residence. Rita Camilleri had sustained more than 100 wounds across her body, with injuries indicating the attack had continued for a significant period. Most disturbingly, investigators discovered that Rita had been decapitated during or after the attack, and her head had been removed from the residence and left outside. The extreme nature of the violence suggested someone in a severely altered mental state. Investigation into Jessica's background revealed extensive documentation of mental health challenges. She had been diagnosed with several conditions affecting her cognitive function and emotional regulation. Medical records showed multiple hospitalizations and treatment attempts over the years, with varying levels of success in managing her symptoms. Family members had expressed concerns about her care needs and the challenges of providing adequate support at home. The relationship between Jessica and Rita had been complicated by Jessica's care requirements. Rita had been serving as her primary caregiver, a role that involved managing difficult behaviors and navigating the mental health system to access appropriate services. Records indicated there had been previous incidents of aggression, though none approaching the severity of what occurred in July 2019. The family had been seeking additional support resources but faced challenges accessing comprehensive care. On the day of the incident, evidence suggested a confrontation had occurred between Jessica and Rita over a seemingly minor issue. Witnesses reported hearing raised voices from the residents before the attack began. However, the extreme escalation from verbal conflict to such severe violence indicated Jessica's response was grossly disproportionate to whatever had triggered her anger. This pattern of extreme overreaction aligned with documented symptoms of her diagnosed conditions. The legal proceedings involved extensive psychiatric evaluation to determine Jessica's criminal responsibility given her mental health diagnoses. Multiple experts examined her and provided testimony about her capacity to understand the nature and consequences of her actions. The evaluations revealed significant impairment in her judgment and impulse control, though experts differed on whether this rose to the level of complete inability to comprehend right from wrong. The prosecution and defense negotiated regarding appropriate charges given the psychiatric evidence. Rather than proceeding to trial on charges carrying the most severe potential sentences, Jessica entered a plea to the lesser offense of manslaughter on the basis of substantial impairment. This plea reflected acknowledgement that while she had caused Rita's passing, her mental health conditions had significantly affected her capacity at the time. In April 2021, Jessica Camilleri was sentenced to 21 years imprisonment with a non-parole period, which was notably less than would typically be imposed for such extreme violence. From a case involving severe mental impairment, attention shifts to a situation where financial motives allegedly drove a calculated plan involving multiple family members. Candace Craig. In May 2023, authorities in Prince George's County, Maryland, began investigating the disappearance of an elderly woman named Margaret Craig. Family members had reported they had not been able to contact her for an extended period, raising concerns about her well-being. The investigation would eventually lead police to her daughter Candace Craig and granddaughter Salia Hardy, uncovering a disturbing sequence of events. Initial inquiries revealed an argument over money had occurred between Margaret and her family members in the days before she was last seen. Financial disputes had been ongoing within the household, with tensions escalating over access to funds and control of resources. Investigators began examining financial records and communications to understand the nature of these conflicts and whether they might be connected to Margaret's disappearance. As the investigation progressed, detectives interviewed Salia Hardy, who eventually provided detailed testimony about what had occurred to her grandmother. Her account described events that shocked investigators with their brutality. According to her statements, Margaret had been attacked following the financial dispute, and rather than seeking medical help or reporting what happened, efforts had been made to conceal the body and destroy evidence. Salia's testimony revealed that after Margaret's passing, Candace had taken extensive steps to dispose of the body in ways designed to prevent identification. The methods allegedly used included dismemberment and attempts to burn remains. These actions demonstrated a calculated effort to eliminate physical evidence rather than an impulsive attempt at concealment following a spontaneous incident. The level of planning involved suggested premeditation in covering up what had occurred. Forensic teams worked to recover and analyze any physical evidence that remained after the alleged disposal efforts. The condition of recovered materials made identification and cause of death determination challenging, though forensic specialists employed various techniques to extract as much information as possible. The extensive measures taken to destroy evidence complicated the investigation, but also demonstrated the lengths to which the perpetrators had allegedly gone. The cooperation of Salia Hardy proved crucial to the case, as her insider testimony provided details that would have been difficult or impossible to establish through physical evidence alone. Her willingness to testify against Candace became a key element of the prosecution's strategy. The breakdown of the relationship between the co-accused created an opportunity for investigators to secure a detailed account of events from someone who had direct knowledge. The charges filed against both Candace Craig and Salia Hardy reflected the seriousness of the alleged offenses. Both faced charges related to Margaret's passing, as well as additional counts concerning the disposal of her body. The legal proceedings would need to address questions of individual culpability and the respective roles each played in what transpired. In July 2024, Candace Craig was convicted and sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. While Candace's case allegedly involved financial motives, the next situation would demonstrate how family conflict could take an unexpected and fatal turn over a household substance. Sherry Lee Heffernan. In late September 2021, authorities in Surf City, New Jersey responded to concerns about two elderly residents who had not been seen or heard from for several days. The individuals were John Enders, aged 87, and his longtime companion, Françoise Pitois, aged 75. When investigators entered the residence, they discovered both had been deceased for some time, having sustained severe injuries that indicated deliberate attacks. The investigation quickly focused on John Enders' daughter, Sherry Lee Heffernan. Authorities determined she had traveled from her residence in Pennsylvania to the New Jersey home in her recreational vehicle on the night the attacks occurred. Surveillance and travel records placed her in the area during the relevant time frame, and forensic evidence collected from the scene would further connect her to what had transpired inside the residence. Forensic examination revealed the extreme nature of the violence inflicted on both victims. John Enders had sustained 51 wounds, while Françoise Pitois had sustained 39 wounds. The number and pattern of injuries indicated sustained attacks that continued well beyond what would have been necessary to incapacitate the victims. The severity suggested intense rage or determination, rather than a brief confrontation that escalated unexpectedly. The investigation into motive revealed significant family conflict centered on financial matters. Sherry had been excluded from her father's will, creating resentment that had apparently festered over time. She felt entitled to inherit from her father and was angered by decisions he had made regarding the distribution of his assets. This sense of financial grievance appeared to have been the driving force behind her actions. Evidence presented during legal proceedings indicated the attacks had involved both shooting and the infliction of numerous wounds. Prosecutors argued the firearms were not used immediately to cause death, but rather to inflict additional suffering. This suggested the attacks were driven by a desire to punish the victims rather than simply to end their lives quickly. The deliberate prolongation of suffering became a key factor in assessing the severity of the offenses. Prosecutors asserted that Sherry had positioned her father in a chair and continued attacking him while maintaining eye contact, a detail that indicated personal confrontation and deliberate cruelty. This level of direct engagement with the victim while inflicting harm suggested calculated malice rather than impulsive violence. The intimacy of the attack, combined with its brutality, painted a picture of someone acting out of deep-seated anger and resentment. The trial in March 2024 resulted in conviction on multiple counts. Sherry Lee Heffernan was found guilty of 2 counts of intentional harm and associated weapons offenses. The jury's verdict reflected the conclusion that the evidence overwhelmingly demonstrated deliberate, premeditated actions rather than any circumstance that might have warranted lesser charges. During sentencing proceedings in May 2024, Superior Court Judge Kimmery Rahill imposed 2 consecutive life sentences. The consecutive nature meant Sherry would need to serve both sentences one after the other, resulting in a requirement to serve 63 years and 9 months without parole eligibility for each count. This effectively ensured she would spend the remainder of her life in custody. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented against her, Sherry cried in court and maintained her innocence, calling the victims priceless people she would forever miss. She expressed that she wished she had been the one who had passed away instead. From violence motivated by financial resentment, the investigation moves to a case that unfolded across decades before discovery. Susan Edwards. In October 2013, authorities in Mansfield, England, made a shocking discovery after receiving information about 2 individuals who had not been seen since 1998. William Wycherley and Patricia Wycherley had apparently disappeared 15 years earlier, but their pensions and benefits had continued to be collected throughout that entire period. When police investigated the property where they had last lived, they uncovered evidence of a crime that had been concealed for more than a decade. Forensic teams excavating the back garden of the residence discovered human remains buried in a shallow area. The bodies were wrapped in material and had been positioned in a way that suggested deliberate concealment rather than proper burial. Analysis confirmed the remains belonged to William and Patricia, and that they had been deceased since around the time of their disappearance in 1998. This meant someone had successfully hidden the crime for 15 years. The investigation led to Susan Edwards, the daughter of William and Patricia, and her husband, Christopher Edwards. Authorities learned the couple had been systematically collecting the deceased couple's pensions and various benefits throughout the 15-year period, accumulating more than £175,000 over time. The financial motive became clear as investigators traced the money trail and examined the couple's spending patterns. Evidence revealed the crime had been planned with financial gain as the primary objective. Susan Edwards harbored long-standing resentment regarding a property transaction from years earlier, where she felt her parents had unfairly profited at her expense. This grievance, combined with her accumulation of debt from purchasing collectibles, created motivation to access her parents' assets. Investigators found that Susan and Christopher had specifically targeted the Wycherleys because the victims lived reclusively and would not be missed if they disappeared. Christopher Edwards, who had expertise with firearms, carried out the actual shooting, firing 2 rounds into each victim at close range. Susan Edwards actively encouraged him during the act, making her an equal participant despite not pulling the trigger herself. The execution-style nature of the attacks indicated planning and resolve rather than impulsive violence during a confrontation. Following the attacks, the couple immediately began accessing the victims' financial resources. Susan Edwards visited the building society to open a joint account with her deceased mother, closing existing accounts and withdrawing approximately £40,000. This rapid exploitation of the financial opportunity demonstrated that money had been the driving force behind the plan from the beginning. To maintain the deception, the couple created an elaborate fiction for the following 15 years, sending notes and cards to relatives, claiming the Wycherleys were traveling around Ireland. The communications were crafted to be convincing and maintain the illusion that William and Patricia were alive and well. This sustained deception required ongoing effort and demonstrated the couple's commitment to preserving their fraudulent income stream. The trial in 2014 resulted in convictions on multiple counts. Both Susan and Christopher Edwards were found guilty of 2 counts of intentional harm, theft, and obstructing the coroner. The charges reflected not just the initial violent acts, but also the extensive financial fraud and body concealment that followed. Sentencing Judge Justice Haddon Cave imposed life imprisonment on both defendants, with a minimum term of 25 years before parole eligibility. The substantial minimum reflected the planning involved, the financial motivation, the victims' ages, the deliberate concealment, and the 15 years of continued deception and theft. The judge noted that while the initial violence was brief, the subsequent criminal enterprise spanning a decade and a half warranted the severe tariff. While the Edwards case involved a long-term deception, the next tragedy would reveal how a teenage relationship conflict could lead to a fatal outcome with help from outside the family. Jamie Silvanek. In March 2015, authorities in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, responded to reports of a missing woman named Cheryl Silvanek. The investigation would eventually reveal that Cheryl's teenage daughter, Jamie, had been involved in planning and carrying out an attack on her mother with help from her boyfriend, an adult who had been in a relationship with the underage girl. Jamie Silvanek was involved with Caleb Barnes, who was serving as an Army specialist. The relationship had created conflict within the family, as Cheryl had discovered the nature of the relationship and threatened to report Barnes to authorities for his involvement with someone underage. This threat apparently motivated Jamie and Barnes to eliminate what they saw as an obstacle to their relationship continuing. Investigators discovered digital communications between Jamie and Barnes that provided clear evidence they had planned the attack in advance. Text messages recovered from their phones showed discussions about how to carry out the attack and what to do afterward. This electronic evidence became crucial to establishing premeditation, rather than allowing any argument that the incident was spontaneous. The attack occurred after the trio had attended a concert together. Rather than the evening ending normally, Barnes carried out the physical attack on Cheryl while she was in her vehicle. Jamie's role in encouraging and facilitating the attack, combined with the digital evidence of planning, established her as an active participant despite not being the one who directly inflicted the fatal injuries. Following Cheryl's passing, the couple took steps to conceal what they had done, including burying the body and submerging Cheryl's vehicle in a pond. These concealment efforts demonstrated continued coordination between them and awareness that they needed to hide evidence of their crime. The calculated nature of the cover-up further supported findings of premeditation and deliberate action. The legal proceedings against Jamie involved complex considerations about trying someone so young for such serious charges. She ultimately entered a guilty plea to first-degree charges and associated offenses. The plea came after prosecutors presented the extensive digital evidence showing her active participation in planning the attack. Her cooperation through the guilty plea avoided a trial, but did not significantly reduce the severity of the sentence. Jamie Silvanek received a sentence of 35 years to life imprisonment. The substantial sentence reflected both the premeditated nature of the offense and the particularly troubling circumstances of a child planning their own parents' demise. Barnes received a separate sentence of life without parole for his role as the adult, who had both engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a minor and carried out the actual attack. Jamie later attempted to have her guilty plea overturned, arguing she had received ineffective legal counsel and that her plea had not been knowing and voluntary. She claimed she had not fully understood what she was agreeing to when she entered the plea. However, a state superior court panel reviewed the arguments and upheld the lower court's refusal to grant a new trial, finding that her plea had been properly entered with adequate understanding of the consequences. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. While Jamie's case involved an inappropriate relationship with an adult, the next tragedy would demonstrate how family financial conflicts could drive actions that shocked investigators with their calculated brutality. Megan Hargan. In July 2017, authorities in McLean, Virginia, responded to a residence where two women had been found deceased from gunshot wounds. The victims were Pamela Hargan and her daughter Helen Hargan. The scene appeared to have been staged as a tragic incident where one family member had harmed another before ending her own life. However, investigators would discover evidence pointing to a far different reality involving financial desperation and calculated deception. The investigation revealed significant financial tensions within the family. Megan Hargan was in the process of purchasing property in West Virginia and was frustrated that her mother was providing financial assistance to Helen, but not to her. This perceived inequity had created resentment that would prove to have deadly consequences. Investigators discovered that financial records and communications would become crucial to understanding what had occurred. Evidence showed that the day before the incident, Megan had attempted to conduct a fraudulent wire transfer of more than $400,000 from her mother's account. The transaction was flagged as potentially fraudulent and blocked by the bank. This failed attempt established a clear financial motive and demonstrated Megan's willingness to access funds that did not belong to her. The timing of this attempted fraud in relation to what subsequently occurred could not be dismissed as coincidental. On the morning of the incident, Megan made a call to the bank from Pamela's home office, attempting to wire money to her closing agent while pretending to be her mother. Recorded phone conversations captured Megan impersonating Pamela during this call. Notably, Pamela was simultaneously in Pennsylvania having lunch with another daughter at the exact timing to this phone call, making it impossible for her to have authorized the transfer. The transaction failed when the bank, contrary to Megan's request, called Pamela's cell phone to verify the transfer, rather than the landline number Megan had specified. When officers arrived at the scene, they discovered Helen in a bathroom with a firearm positioned between her legs in what appeared to be an attempt to stage the incident as a self-inflicted situation. Megan's cell phone was found partially on top of a blanket in the room. The positioning of evidence and the circumstances raised immediate questions about whether the scene had been manipulated to conceal what actually happened. Forensic specialists were retained to reconstruct the scene. After analyzing photographic evidence, experts concluded that Helen did not take her own life, despite acknowledging that Helen's physical stature would have made it possible for her to reach the trigger. The reconstruction revealed inconsistencies that contradicted the staged appearance of the scene. This forensic analysis proved essential in demonstrating that someone had deliberately manipulated evidence to mask the true nature of the incident. The weapon used was a rifle belonging to Megan's husband that had been temporarily stored in the home. This established Megan's access to the means used in the attacks. Following the discovery of the bodies, Megan immediately attempted to conduct the same fraudulent wire transfer from her mother's account that had previously been blocked. This action demonstrated that financial gain remained her focus, even immediately after the tragic events. The legal proceedings were complicated by an initial conviction that was later vacated due to juror misconduct, requiring a second trial. In September 2023, Megan Hargan was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree intentional harm and 2 weapons charges. In January 2024, Megan received 2 consecutive life sentences, plus 6 years for firearms charges. Commonwealth's attorney Steve Descano stated that Megan's actions went beyond what most people can imagine. From a case involving financial manipulation and staged evidence, attention shifts to another tragedy where mental health diagnoses became central to understanding what occurred. Cheyenne Jesse. In July 2015, authorities in Lakeland, Florida began investigating after Cheyenne Jesse reported that her father Mark Weekly and her daughter Meredith had gone missing. The circumstances of their disappearance raised immediate concerns among investigators. Cheyenne's accounts of events contained inconsistencies that prompted closer examination of her statements and the timeline of when the two were last seen. Cheyenne contacted family members claiming her father and daughter were missing. She provided explanations about where they might have gone, but her narratives quickly began to contradict themselves. For instance, she claimed her father was supposed to have a serious medical condition but could not provide basic details about the nature of the illness or which doctor he was seeing. Family members recognized the significance of these contradictory stories as indicators that something was seriously wrong. Investigation into Cheyenne's background revealed she had been diagnosed with a mental health condition during her early years. Her aunt and uncle reported that Cheyenne had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder when she was only 8 years old. This early diagnosis indicated she had been managing psychological challenges for most of her life. However, the presence of a mental health condition did not automatically explain or excuse what had allegedly occurred. As the investigation continued, Cheyenne eventually confessed to what had happened to her father and daughter. According to her account, she had been in a dispute with her father, Mark Weekly, before events escalated. She acknowledged that both Mark and Meredith had been harmed, and that she had subsequently hidden their bodies in an attempt to conceal what had transpired. Her confession provided crucial details that led investigators to recover the remains. Cheyenne revealed she had gotten the idea for concealing the bodies in storage containers from watching the television program Criminal Minds. This detail demonstrated she had been capable of planning and executing a cover-up strategy, suggesting a level of cognitive function and awareness of consequences. The fact that she drew inspiration from a crime drama indicated she understood her actions were illegal and needed to be hidden. Evidence indicated that both victims had sustained injuries from shooting and from other means. The use of multiple methods suggested the attacks had been sustained rather than brief. The circumstances surrounding Meredith's passing were particularly troubling to investigators and would become a central factor in determining appropriate charges and potential sentencing. Cheyenne claimed she had acted in self-defense against her father, but officials determined this assertion was not supported by the evidence. The physical evidence and circumstances did not align with a scenario where she had been protecting herself from imminent harm. Additionally, the claim of self-defense could not explain what had occurred to Meredith, who posed no threat to anyone. The legal proceedings resulted in conviction on charges of first-degree intentional harm. The fact that one victim was a young family member became a significant aggravating factor. The jury unanimously recommended the most severe penalty available under Florida law. Their recommendation specifically cited the circumstances involving Meredith. The final determination rests with Circuit Court Judge Jalal Harb. While Cheyenne's case involved mental health considerations, the next situation would demonstrate a sentencing outcome that diverged dramatically from what might typically be expected given the circumstances. Megan Joyce Emirovich. In October 2021, emergency services in Groveland Township, Michigan, responded to a residence where a man had sustained severe chemical injuries. The victim was Conrad Emirovich, who was found with extensive burns across his body. The circumstances that led to these injuries would reveal a domestic incident with tragic consequences that unfolded while he slept. Megan Joyce Emirovich, then 18 years old, had thrown lye mixed with water onto her sleeping father. Lye is a caustic chemical drain cleaner that causes severe burns upon contact with skin. The Oakland County prosecutor stated that Megan had lashed out in anger, though the specific trigger for her rage was not fully detailed in public records. The act of using such a dangerous substance on someone who was sleeping indicated a level of deliberation and awareness of the harm it would cause. The injuries Conrad sustained were catastrophic. The chemical burns were so extensive that medical teams eventually had to amputate his feet and part of his leg in attempts to manage the tissue damage and prevent infection. Despite intensive medical intervention, his condition continued to deteriorate over the following months. He remained hospitalized as doctors worked to address the ongoing complications from the chemical exposure. Konrad Emirovich survived for 5 months following the attack before being removed from life support on March 6, 2022. The extended period of suffering and medical intervention before his eventual passing demonstrated the severity of the injuries inflicted by the Lye attack. The cause of death was confirmed as resulting from the chemical burns and their associated complications, establishing a direct link between Megan's actions and her father's demise. The legal proceedings involved charges related to the use of harmful substances resulting in death. Megan was convicted of unlawful possession or use of harmful devices or irritants causing death, a felony that under Michigan law is punishable by life imprisonment or any term of years. This conviction acknowledged that her deliberate use of a caustic chemical had directly resulted in her father's passing after months of suffering. Under Michigan sentencing guidelines applicable to her case, she faced between 51 and 85 months in prison, equivalent to approximately 4 to 7 years. However, the sentencing hearing produced an unexpected outcome. Megan tearfully addressed the court, quoting biblical scripture and expressing remorse for what had occurred. She cited Proverbs chapter 12, verse 13. Her emotional presentation and expressions of regret appeared to have significant impact on the proceedings. Additionally, her mother spoke on her behalf, arguing that Megan's emotional maturity had not reached adult levels despite her chronological age. Judge Victoria Valentine imposed a sentence of 1 year in prison with credit for 17 months already served, plus 5 years of probation. This meant Megan was immediately released from custody on the night of her sentencing, as she had already served more than the 1-year term imposed. The sentence was dramatically below the minimum guideline range and represented extraordinary judicial leniency given the circumstances of the offense. Megan was released immediately following the sentencing hearing. She would be required to complete 5 years of probation with conditions including supervision and treatment requirements. From a case with remarkably lenient sentencing, attention shifts to a situation where documented circumstances of family life would prove crucial to understanding both the actions taken and the legal response. Gina Grant. Gina Grant was involved in an incident in 1991 that resulted in the passing of her mother, Dorothy Mayfield, using a lead crystal candlestick. The case would become notable not only for the tragic outcome, but also for subsequent controversy regarding college admissions and questions about how society evaluates young offenders who claim they acted in response to difficult home environments. Grant claimed she had endured years of maltreatment at the hands of her mother, who struggled with serious drinking problems. The mother's difficulties with consuming beverages were confirmed and documented. This established context for understanding the household environment in which Gina had been raised. However, questions remained about the extent of other claimed difficulties beyond the documented substance issues. The incident itself involved a blunt instrument rather than a weapon typically associated with premeditation. The use of a candlestick that was readily available in the home was argued by some observers as evidence suggesting lack of advanced planning. The The spontaneous selection of such an object could indicate the incident arose from immediate conflict rather than calculated intent to cause harm. The nature of the weapon chosen became a factor in evaluating whether the actions were premeditated or impulsive. However, external analysis of the case noted complexities in evaluating Gina's claims. Beyond the confirmed issues with beverages, there was limited verifiable evidence supporting other aspects of maltreatment she described. This created challenges for those attempting to assess the degree to which her actions might have been influenced by genuine trauma versus other motivations. The difficulty of proving historical household dynamics years after the fact complicated legal and social evaluations of the case. Following completion of her term in juvenile detention and subsequent parole, Gina was released from supervision and able to resume her life as an adult. The juvenile system's approach had allowed for a resolution that balanced accountability with recognition of her developmental stage at the time of the incident. She was able to move forward without the permanent criminal record that would have resulted from adult prosecution. This represented the rehabilitative ideal of the juvenile justice system functioning as intended. However, consequences extended beyond the formal legal system. Gina had been admitted to Harvard University, but when the institution later learned details about her background that had not been disclosed in her application, they withdrew the admission. While Gina's case involved claimed maltreatment that was partially documented, the next situation would present evidence of family circumstances that investigators and courts found compelling and well substantiated. Brescia Meadows. In July 2016, authorities in Warren, Ohio responded to a residence where a man had been shot. The victim was the father of the household. An initial investigation would reveal this was not a case of an intruder or stranger violence, but rather an incident involving a family member. The circumstances that led to the shooting would become the subject of extensive examination and public discussion. Brescia Meadows, who was 14 years old at the time, was identified as the person who had used the firearm. She was taken into custody and faced potential charges that could result in her being tried as an adult and spending many years in prison if convicted. The severity of potential penalties sparked immediate attention to the case and the circumstances that might have led a young person to take such drastic action. Investigation into the family's history revealed extensive documentation of serious problems within the household. Evidence confirmed sustained patterns of harmful behavior perpetrated by the father against family members over an extended period. This was not based solely on retrospective claims, but was corroborated through multiple sources, including testimony from Brescia's mother and siblings who had also experienced and witnessed the father's conduct. The mother and other family members provided consistent accounts, describing years of ongoing situations that created an environment of fear and danger within the home. Their testimonies established a pattern of behavior that had been occurring throughout Brescia's formative years, creating circumstances where she and other family members felt perpetually unsafe. This documented history became crucial to understanding her state of mind and the context in which she accessed the firearm. The legal proceedings involved extensive consideration of whether Brescia's actions should be evaluated as those of someone who had committed an unprovoked attack, or as someone who had acted in response to ongoing threats to herself and her family. The documented evidence of household circumstances provided substantial support for arguments that she had acted out of genuine fear rather than malicious intent. Defense efforts required significant financial resources to retain expert witnesses who could testify about the psychological effects of growing up in such an environment. The costs associated with mounting an adequate defense highlighted economic barriers that many families face when trying to present mitigating evidence in serious cases. The need for tens of thousands of dollars to properly validate trauma through expert testimony created additional burdens for families already dealing with crisis. Rather than proceeding to trial where she could have faced much more severe charges, Brescia accepted a plea agreement to a lesser offense of involuntary manslaughter. This charge acknowledged that while she had caused her father's passing, the circumstances suggested she had not acted with the deliberate intent that would constitute more serious charges. The plea reflected acknowledgement that her actions occurred in a context of documented endangerment. Following acceptance of the plea, Brescia spent 9 months in custody before being released to a residential treatment facility. The focus shifted from punishment to providing therapeutic intervention to address the trauma she had experienced. The residential facility would provide structured support while allowing her to work on healing from years of living in fear. From a case where documented household circumstances led to a mitigated outcome, attention turns to a final situation where relationship dynamics and claims of coercion would factor into legal proceedings. Rachel Scarlett Malenicz. In 2003, authorities in Newport Beach, California, discovered the body of Barbara Malenicz floating near a yacht club. The 56-year-old woman had been found unclothed in the water, raising immediate questions about how she had ended up in that location and condition. The investigation would eventually lead to her daughter Rachel Scarlett Malenicz and Rachel's boyfriend Alan. Rachel was arrested 2 days after Barbara's passing in Louisiana, where she was traveling with Alan toward Florida. The fact that she had left California shortly after her mother's disappearance and was located far from home raised immediate suspicions about her potential involvement. Her apprehension out of state suggested she had been attempting to flee rather than cooperate with the investigation into her mother's whereabouts. Forensic examination of Barbara's body revealed concerning evidence about the circumstances of her passing. She had sustained numerous defensive wounds, indicating she had struggled against an attacker and attempted to protect herself. The pattern and location of these injuries told investigators that Barbara had been aware of the attack and had fought back, though ultimately unsuccessfully. The defensive wounds suggested the attack had been sustained rather than brief. During legal proceedings, Rachel testified in her own defense, claiming that Alan had been responsible for harming her mother and that he had forced her to flee with him. According to her account, she had not participated in the attack itself, but had been compelled to accompany Alan afterward out of fear for her own safety. She portrayed herself as a victim of coercion who had been trapped in a situation beyond her control. However, Rachel acknowledged that she had assisted Alan in cleaning the location where the incident occurred and had helped dispose of Barbara's body in the harbor. She claimed she had only participated in these activities because she was in shock and afraid of what Alan might do if she refused. Her defense strategy focused on arguing that while she had been present and involved in the aftermath, her actions were motivated by fear rather than willing participation. The prosecution challenged Rachel's portrayal of herself as purely a victim. The active steps she took to conceal evidence and dispose of her mother's body suggested a level of participation that went beyond merely being present. Her decision to flee the state with Alan rather than contacting authorities once they were away from the immediate scene also undermined claims that she was acting solely under duress. Investigation revealed that relationship between Barbara and Rachel had been strained. Barbara had expressed concerns about Rachel's relationship with Alan and had attempted to exercise parental authority in ways that Rachel resented. This background of family conflict over the relationship provided potential motive beyond claims of coercion, suggesting that eliminating parental interference may have been a factor. The trial resulted in conviction on charges related to Barbara's passing. Rachel Scarlett Malenicz received a sentence of 25 years to life imprisonment. The substantial sentence reflected the court's determination that her active involvement in concealing evidence and disposing of the body constituted sufficient culpability for severe punishment, regardless of whether she had directly inflicted the fatal injuries. The case illustrated how claims of duress and coercion are evaluated against evidence of active participation in criminal conduct. While Rachel argued she had acted out of fear, her extensive involvement in covering up the offense and her flight from the jurisdiction suggested decision-making that went beyond mere compliance with threats. The court's rejection of the duress defense and imposition of a lengthy sentence established that such participation carries substantial criminal liability, even when the defendant claims to have been under another person's influence. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.